you so much for coming, especially everyone who wore their 5K shirts. Thank you so much. We had a couple of people who thought it was a 5K a day this year, which I got a couple emails at. So extra respect to them. That was crazy. Thank you all so much for coming. We're glad you're here. We've got a couple things coming up here at REEF. We've got our single day summer camps programs. They're going to run every Wednesday from June 8th through August 3rd. So getting ready to start. If you have any questions about that, ask Moose, and she can help get you set up for that.
Are they for kids?
That's Moose. Yes, for kids. For kids, yes.
Those are singles.
Age 7 to 13.
Ages 7 to 13.
Ages 7 to 13.
You can also set up your own summer camps if you'd like, for the right price.
We also have our photo contest is now open. So if you have any great underwater photos, you can submit those online at reef.org/photo contest.
Yep.
And that closes July 31st. So there's plenty of categories of any level. Send us your best underwater photo. I saw Daryl has already entered. That came in.
Yep.
So send them in. We also have our Reef Lionfish Derby and Festival. That's going to be September 10th, 11th, and 12th, with the main festival being on the 12th, which is a Sunday at Postcard Inn in Isla Mirada. So definitely register a team. The shirts are super cool. They're those blue ones with the lionfish on the back or on the side. Really nice. And with that, does anybody have any community announcements? All right, that's an easy one this time. Excellent. Well, without further ado, tonight's speaker is one of our own REEF staff. Our program services coordinator, Stacy Henderson, will be talking about Blue Heron Bridge and everything you can find there, from everything to how to do the dive to the best fish there. So without further ado, Stacy, take it away.
All right. All right. Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're having a great evening. Like David said, my name is Stacy Henderson. I am REEF's Program Services Coordinator. And tonight we're going to be talking about Blue Heron Bridge and the Great Annual Fish Count. So I don't know how many people have heard of Blue Heron Bridge? Okay, quite a few. How many have you dove it before? Okay, awesome. So I hope you guys take a little bit from this presentation, but for those of you who haven't dove it before, it's probably one of my favorite dive sites because of its diversity, ease of dive or ease of use. It's a very interesting place for REEF as well. And as I kind of think about how I wanted to do this presentation, I kind of wanted not to go through all the fish families and kind of break it down. I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. So I thought about kind of do like a dive with you guys, or have you guys join me on a dive. So we'll go through Blue Heron Bridge through a dive, and we'll kind of point out what you're going to see, where you're going to see it. And all the photos tonight are photos that I've taken over the last, I think, 3 years. I think my first dive was summer 2019. So these are all the things that I've seen throughout through those years. So this is our dive plan. So when even with snorkeling as well, you plan your dive, plan your snorkel, and you snorkel or dive your plan. So this is kind of our plan for the presentation. We're going to talk about Blue Heron Bridge and the Great Annual Fish Count, kind of what it is. We're going to talk about how to dive Blue Heron Bridge, best practices, and kind of our dive snorkel plan for the rest of the presentation. And then with that, we're going to go into our fish species. We're going to talk about gobies, blennies, seahorses, pipefish, bottom dwellers like frogfish and flounders, scorpionfish, and a lot of others. All right, starting with our Great Annual Fish Count. So our Great Annual Fish Count is kind of a celebration of one of our projects, our volunteer fish survey project, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. You don't necessarily have to do it through the month of July. It's just kind of a celebration of that project. You can do surveys throughout the year, but it's kind of a catalyst to introduce divers and snorkelers, the general public, to this program. So we kind of facilitate that and promote it during the month of July, which is next month. You can join as an individual, you can join as a group, you can make an event out of it. It's just a lot of fun. And you can also earn a Conservation Challenge sticker, and you can talk to Sierra if you have any more questions about our Conservation Challenge, which is very exciting. These are a few pictures of past intern groups and staff diving the bridge over the years.
got a frogfish there?
Yep. So this is a good eye. This is a striated frogfish. I'll talk a little bit about that guy a little later. All right. So to start our journey, we're going to start where we are right now, Key Largo. It's not quite on Key Largo, but close enough. And then Blue Heron Bridge is up kind of north of Fort Lauderdale in Miami. I'm sure a bunch of you guys are familiar with it. And it takes about 2.5 hours to get there, depending on traffic. Zooming in a little bit, you can see Blue Heron Bridge is this kind of bridge that goes over connecting mainland Florida to Singer Island. And if you look here, Phil Foster Park is where Blue Heron Bridge, the dive site, is located. So it's actually in a state park, Phil Foster State Park. It was established in 1953 by a guy named Phil Foster, who was considered a pioneer in the community, which is pretty interesting. So, yep, that's where it is. And this is zooming in even more. This is a map by one of our conservation partners, Pura Vida. They're actually kind of located probably just right here. They're one of the local dive shops you can rent gear from, and they know about REEF, and they're one of our conservation partners, so you can get tanks, weights, anything you need to do this dive. So this is a great map of the park itself. There's some amenities, parking, restrooms, freshwater showers, things like that. It's got a good map of the dive site itself, marking some hazards like the boat channel and kind of where to go. For me personally, it's probably one of my favorite dive sites I've ever done. Definitely one of my top 5 dives I've done has been here because of, like I said earlier, the diversity that you find and kind of the ease of diving. And to REEF, it's very important as well. It's probably, it kind of goes back and forth between 2 dive sites, Something Special in Bon Air and Blue Heron Bridge as one of our kind of most diverse sites. It holds, I think this morning it was 453 fish species have been reported in this kind of small area in the middle of the city, which is pretty unique. And I don't think anyone really knows why this place holds so much diversity. That could be the currents, could be a bunch of different factors, but it's really interesting to think about. You can find all of those fish from hammerheads. They were finding a hammerhead a couple weeks ago, manta rays to frogfish and gobies. So it's really interesting things you can find. All right, this is moose for anyone. So how to dive it and best practices, kind of the best, you want to dive at a certain time, and that is at slack high tide. And slack high tide means just before high tide. That's when you're going to kind of get the best visibility, and kind of there can be a lot of currents through this dive site because it's kind of in a bridge in the middle of a channel, so the water is going to be coming in and out. So there can be a lot of current here, and you can find out where that slack high tide, when that is, through a bunch of different charts through Pura Vida or other dive shops, or just by Googling it. It'll tell you exactly what time it is, and you want to aim to kind of get in 45 minutes to an hour before that slack high tide. That way you can kind of get the most out of your dive. You want to arrive early for various reasons. Once you have enough time to get ready, but as well as there can be quite a bit of traffic at the park during the weekends, so much that they will close down the entrance and not let anyone in if it gets really busy. So keep that in mind if you are trying to do it on the weekends. The weekdays, it's a little better. Excuse me, there's not a lot of people going, but you can drop off your gear here, and there is like a mall parking lot here that you could also use, and it's maybe a quarter mile, 5-10 minute walk from that parking lot. You're required to have a diver down flag when you dive the bridge. I say unique diver down flag because there are a lot of other people there with the same exact flag as you. So if you do get separated from the person holding the flag, it's a good idea to have something that you can identify your flag from. And if you have a big group, you probably want to. Since you're traveling so far, you probably want to bring a Dive kit and an extra tank just in case you need O-rings or a mask strap. That happened to me a couple weeks ago. My mask strap broke right before we went for the dive, and thankfully Lex was there with a spare mask strap for me. And probably the biggest advice I could give you for doing this dive is to dive slow. It's kind of like a muck dive-ish, so there's a lot of the stuff you're going to find is smaller, and visibility is generally very good for snorkelers as well. My average depth is probably about 10 feet. So you can definitely find everything that I'm going to be talking about tonight snorkeling as well. But going slow and looking through all the seagrass and underneath all the rocks and stuff, and you'll find the most stuff. Like I said before, be aware of the current. Watch out for boats, jet skis, and fishermen. There are a couple fishing piers to be aware of. You can definitely see everything you want to see without getting close to the fishing piers, but if you do wander near them, just be careful. And this channel is very popular, so definitely stay inside the diving zone. Watch your air and stick with your flag. Okay. So moving into kind of how we're going to plan our dive and see what fish we're going to see. There are kind of two different routes I generally take, but you're welcome to plan your own dive. I kind of either enter from the west side or the east side, depending on which bridge I want to go under. So you can go under both of them. And I kind of just make a U towards the bridge, starting my dive and then kind of ending my dive under the bridge. I actually very rarely spend a lot of time under the bridge. I kind of find myself spending most of my time kind of out in the sand flats. So how we're going to kind of plan our dive is we're going to do the west side. It's kind of one of my favorite sides to dive. So we're going to start our dive kind of getting into the water. And it's like usually very sandy, fine sand, silty, with algae kind of out front here. And we'll start there, and I'll tell you what kind of fish I usually find there. And we'll kind of move over towards the bridge, and all the current comes through here, and it kind of washes away that fine silty sand. So you've got larger pieces of rocks and shells, and you can find different species there. And then we'll work our way underneath the bridge and kind of show you what species you'll find on the cement pilings, as well as what you would find underneath the bridge. And to start off with, right out of the gate, the first species I usually look in right when I drop down is the seahorse. Blue Heron Bridge, you can find a lot of them. I think I saw maybe 8 on one dive once. And kind of what I do is there's a nice sandy entry, and then you kind of start with this seagrass. I don't know if it's quite seagrass, but just different species of algae, kind of like a line almost. And once you hit that seagrass, that's where you're going to find these seahorses. And what I do is generally get level with the bottom and kind of just look out and see if anything is kind of standing up. This is our long snout seahorse. It's got like a longer snout. Sometimes they can vary in color. They also have, it's tough to see on this guy, but they have some black spots on them as well. Fairly small, 2 to 4 inches. But you often find them hanging on that seagrass as well. This is an orange version of it, so they vary in color quite a bit, but they have that long snout. And I'll have you guys pay attention to what kind of markings are around its eye. You don't really see any, do you? So we move on to our next species, which is the line seahorse. And you can tell because it's got all those lines coming off the eye. And another thing to notice is there's not a lot of fleshy tabs or camouflage coming off the long snout, whereas the line, you can see a lot coming off of them. Still has kind of a long snout, but it's got those lines, and here's a more detailed picture of that. And through all of this, if you guys have any questions or have any comments or any advice as well, feel free to say so. All right, moving on to these guys are everywhere at the bridge. They're very friendly, very photogenic. These are our band-tailed puffers. They have black bands on their tail. They're very photogenic. They kind of are very curious. So I oftentimes kind of have to, I'll be taking a picture of a fish and they'll kind of swim in to check out, see my lens or my port. So they're very cool to see. They're about 4 to 7 inches all over the place. They've got that green color. But with the sand there, sometimes a lot of these species will almost look paled out because they're trying to match their color a little bit to the sand. So sometimes they're not as green. And these are our orange spotted gobies. These guys are fairly small, but you'll see them perching on the top of the sand. They create these burrows that they hang out of. So you'll kind of see them off in the distance perched out on their burrows. And they're pretty shy, so you want to kind of approach them slowly and watch them from afar. But you can differentiate them from the kind of orange spots here, almost look like tiger stripes. And if you can get close enough, they do have a long first dorsal spine. This guy's is a little broken. That's a good way to identify them. They've got kind of big, tall eyes to see over the sand. Another thing really interesting, if you find these guys, hang out for a little bit, because they also have a shrimp that hangs out with them. And what the gobies will do is they'll hang out and keep watch over the sand to make sure no predators are coming. And the shrimp will dig their burrow. And if you look really closely, you'll always see one of the antennae touching the fish. So if the fish moves, the shrimp knows to go back into its burrow, and the fish will hide. So it's kind of an interesting form of communication, but it's kind of really cool to see the shrimp push out all the sand and it's constantly cleaning the burrow. All right. This guy, has anyone ever accidentally touched a flounder? So these guys are very camouflaged, and they rely on that camouflage to the point where if you put your hand down in the sand and you could touch one, because they don't move at all. This guy is our eyed flounder, and he's a left-eyed flounder. Does anyone know why it would be called a left-eyed flounder?
His eyes on the left when it's like that.
Yep, exactly. So you can see that the fish's eyes are on the left side of its body. And this is our eyed flounder. And you can tell because it's got a nice dusky patch here, mid-body, and a couple of dots here. They're tough to tell sometimes, but that dusky patch is what you want to look for. And interesting in males, and it's kind of what I mainly use to identify, is the males have really widely spaced eyes. And it's pretty interesting. Here's a male and a female. You can see this guy's eyes are wide, pretty offset. And here's that black spot there and that black spot there. This is a close-up of the male. You can see it's got its eyes spaced out, and it's got like this peacock blue pattern kind of in between its eyes. Whereas the female, it doesn't really have that coloration, but the eyes are kind of spaced closer together. So that's the male and the female. Pretty decent size, maybe like pancake sized. And our only scorpionfish tonight, this is my favorite scorpionfish. This is the mushroom scorpionfish. They generally like to bury themselves in the sand. I probably see more at night, but you can be found during the day. And they get their name from these upside down mushroom-like projections on their eye. It's really cool to look at a lot of different species of fish's eye because they're always different and they always kind of have unique features to them. And there's another species that I'll go over later that does the same thing. It's right above. It's on the out. It's like right on the outside because you can kind of see that there's a drop shadow underneath some of the appendages. But yeah, it looks like upside down mushrooms. It's pretty cool. And this guy's very small for a scorpionfish, 1/2 to 2 inches. So really cool to find. I think there was one time David and I did a night dive and we found probably 6 or 7 altogether. It was really interesting, but they were all kind of half buried with just their eyes sticking out.
Are they venomous?
Yes, all scorpionfish are venomous. And I'm not sure, I know it's probably their dorsal spines, but I don't know quite sure if it's like similar to a lionfish. That's a good question. So with all fish ID, we can be sure of what species of fish we've found for a very long time, but then it's always kind of a moving, not necessarily a moving target, but we can always be, our minds can always be changed. I had originally ID'd this as a different batfish, but in going through my presentation this afternoon with Moose, we decided that it was a polka dot batfish. And the reason for that would be, is it does have these polka dot markings and kind of I guess you could consider these polka dots, but the other batfish I was looking at doesn't necessarily have those markings. So it's kind of really interesting and fun thing to do is to look at old pictures and old IDs and change them as you get better at fish ID. But another thing we came to realize is that there's these black spots with white rings around them that go from the eye all the way to its gills, or its which are interestingly in the armpit of the fish. This is kind of what they look like under closer look. So very interesting fish. They're pretty big. They can get up to 12 inches. They just kind of sit there. You'll just be swimming along, and there it will be, and it kind of just sits there for you. This is the polka dot batfish.
Stacy, what was the other fish that you thought it might have been?
I think it was the long-nosed short-nosed batfish. Because the short-nosed batfish, it's got bars on its tail, and I thought maybe that this bar here maybe wasn't as defined, but in looking at the rest of the markers, we decided to change it. This is one of the species that I think, and I've only heard of being able to see at the bridge. This is similar to our brown garden eel, which is found at deep depths in large sand flats. But this guy was found in 10, 15 feet of water, very shallow. They like to live in large colonies. This is the yellow garden eel, the yellow coloration with the white underside. And there's a colony, I think there was maybe 15 of them together, and they kind of hung out. When we get back to the map, I'll show you, but kind of where the channels were, kind of on the edge of the channel where it kind of got a little deeper, just picking plankton out of the water during when the current was going by. Very graceful, very cool to look at. Very shy, so it takes a long time if you're close to them for them to come out even a little bit. Normally you can just barely see their heads poking out. Yeah. This is kind of another picture of them kind of all together. And we have that nice still, that fine silty sand with little bits of seagrass and algae. Perfect. So when I was talking about, they're kind of, I think I found them kind of over here where there's kind of a decline in the sand. It kind of got a little deeper and they were on that kind of hill. So now that we've gone through the silty sand, we're going to kind of move on to our rubbly areas with our large rocks and big pieces of shells and debris. You can also, they have a nice, they call it the snorkel trail. It's a bunch of artificial reef that they put down. Really interesting to visit. I would say you'd find more of like your sergeant majors, like these guys, your blue tangs and things like that over on this snorkel trail here.
Stacy, over on that side where you saw the conger eels, have you ever seen the yellow-headed jawfish over there? Because we've heard they're over there too.
Yeah, I've seen yellow-headed jawfish here. There's also the, actually I think the next one I'm going to go over is the banded jawfish. Lots of jawfish there. And these guys are, yellow-headed jawfishes are a little smaller. The banded jawfish can get 4 to 6 inches, so fairly large. I'll kind of just move to the next picture here. This is the kind of substrate I'm talking about, the kind of large shells and rocks. And these banded jawfish like that because they can make their, they can kind of support their burrows with those large pieces of debris. So if you ever see a hole with these large shells around it, there's probably a banded jawfish or a similar species living there. And you can, kind of the key identifying marker for the banded jawfish, you can only really tell when their mouth is open. Carlos and Allison and Ned and Anna have really good photos of them kind of opening their mouth, and they've got white and black bands inside their mouth. They'll kind of use that for territorial displays or things like that. I haven't actually been able to see it yet. It's on my list of things to find.
Stacy, do they do the same thing that yellowhead jawfish do? You know, coming up out of their holes?
Not as much. The only really times I've seen them come out of the hole is kind of to fight off another one. But most of the time I just kind of see them sitting. Yeah, and sometimes they'll kind of dig down and take a mouthful of sand and plop it out onto the side of their burrow. But I'm not sure if they're plankton pickers like the yellowhead jawfish are. I'm not quite sure.
Because a friend saw a jawfish the other day.
Mm-hmm.
She said it wasn't a yellowhead, it was brown.
Okay.
It was big. So I'm thinking maybe.
It definitely could be. And as well, these jawfish, they're mouth brooders. So the male will take the eggs in the mouth and they'll incubate the eggs in the mouth. And sometimes, I don't know, maybe that the jawfish was swimming out and spitting out the eggs, because what they'll do is they'll spit out the eggs and suck them back in to aerate them. Maybe he was doing something like that. And you'll see, I've seen quite a few pictures of people with the the eggs in the mouth, and it's a pretty interesting thing to find. So yeah, this is a territorial dispute, I'm assuming, of two males kind of swimming back and forth, yelling at each other, it looked like. Yes.
Is there any type of jawfish that could be mistaken for if they're not opening their mouth with the bands, or is that the only jawfish that looks like?
Yeah, so there are a couple other species. There's the molted jawfish, and then I think it's the spot fin jawfish that can be difficult to tell. And it's kind of tough to see, but there is a spot lower down in its dorsal fin. It's kind of like right kind of there in these guys that you could use to identify it. Or the spot fin, I think, has one right there. And the modeled, you would look at their jaw. Their jaw is a lot kind of more robust, I believe. So I would definitely take a picture if you have your camera with you and kind of go over through the book with it. Yes, Moose.
If you're doing a survey and you see a jawfish like this, but you're not for sure, like you didn't get a picture, you just can't identify it, you can always report unidentified jawfish species.
Mm-hmm. So for our streaming listeners, if you see a jawfish and you're not quite sure what it was, but you know it was a jawfish, you can always write on your survey unidentified jawfish. That still is helpful and still goes into our system if you're not quite sure what species it was. All right. Okay. So kind of similar to our jawfish, the blue-throated pike blenny also burrows into the sand, or kind of creates a little burrow for itself. And these guys get their name, or the males have this nice blue patterning in their throat when they're kind of in their mating colors. Pretty big, 3 to 4 inches. They're like pretty much a big straw. That's kind of how I would describe them. And with the same kind of way you find the seahorses is how I find the pike blennies, is getting level with the bottom and kind of looking out and seeing little sticks that are sticking up, and I'll watch to see if they move or get a little closer. This is a little close up on its face. You can kind of see it's got some yellow there and that blue in its throat. And the females are a little bit different. This is a female. It's got a dark bar going along its midsection here with some white spots on it as well. You'll often find these guys swimming out and about outside of a tube, which is really interesting. They'll just kind of be swimming around, and follow them if you find one. Sometimes you can see them getting, I've seen one grab a little shrimp, which is pretty cool. And then this is their displaying, the males displaying. I think a couple of weeks ago, I had found one of these guys, and I kind of sat there and watched him for a bit. And then I saw another one, and another one, and another one. There was a whole colony of these blue-throated pike blennies, all males, one by one, kind of going up and doing their displays. So it was really cool to see, but it's kind of throwing up that dorsal fin with that. It's kind of got this orange mark here on the first dorsal spine, and that blue markings on its throat that it's puffing up. And that's the blue-throated pike blenny. Very cool thing to find. All right, on to a couple species of pipefish. We're still finding these guys in kind of that larger rubbly area, not quite in that fine sand. This guy is our short fin pipefish, and it's kind of got these bars going down its body. They can be vary from dark brown to lavender, and you can find them. Actually, they can be found as deep as 1,100 feet, which is pretty crazy. This is just another variation of the short fin pipefish. It's kind of different colorations. Same with the seahorses. They can kind of vary in different colors. And this guy is our crested pipefish. I found this one maybe 3 weeks ago. Oh, thanks. Sorry. Thank you. I've been practicing too much. I lost my voice. This is our crested pipefish. It's got a nice crest on its face. He was very small. He was only he's probably around the smaller size, 3 inches. But nice crest on the top of his head, a very short, blunt nose, and those brown spaced out markings going along its body. And he's very, very small. And when looking for the pipefish, if you're snorkeling, you want to look for the kind of the long, so I would say look for something like this, kind of an unbroken long piece of seagrass and like a long stick almost, and watch it for a minute and see if it moves. All right, moving on to some other bottom dwellers. This is our bandtail sea robin. It's got 3 reddish brown bands on its tail. And sea robins are pretty interesting because they have a modified pelvic fin that kind of looks like fingers. And it'll use that to crawl along the bottom, which is super cool. And they also have modified pectoral fins as well. This guy was, usually you would see them kind of have them flat on the bottom, which would kind of make them look bigger. But this guy was kind of puffing them up on his side to make him look kind of, you know, more robust, a little taller, which was interesting. He was walking along the bottom in broad daylight, not having a care in the world. Really cool. Very, yeah, did not care that I was there taking pictures of them. It was really interesting. Another way to tell is they've got this brownish gray color, and they've got really long cirri coming off the tip of their nose. A moth? Yeah. He's got like big wings. And he curved them out, which was really, really interesting. Yeah. And this is kind of how I would imagine most sea robins, is they kind of flare them out on the bottom there. This is our leopard sea robin. It's got a lot of leopard patterning going on. It also has a few dark bands going down its body. But yeah, look at that leopard coloration. But they also have the fingers that they use to crawl along the bottom. And this is one of my favorite fish to find there. This is our flying Gannard, and this guy's in full display, fanning out his modified pectoral fins. This iridescent blue color, really pretty fish to find. But you'll also notice they've got some, I don't know, they almost look like hands in the front of them. And they use those to dig around in the sand. So they not only use their pectoral fins to kind of as a defense, but they also use them as foraging. But they have the same finger-like modified pelvic fin to kind of crawl along the bottom. So you'll see the sea robins and flying Gannards swim, but most of the time they're just crawling slowly along the bottom. All right. This is, I think, by far my favorite fish, so I may talk about it a little longer than the other fish. This is the striated frogfish, and it gets its name from the striations you'll find on its body, but that I wouldn't say that's the major identifying factor. There are a lot of frogfish that vary in color and textures and things like that. The way to identify them is through their lures. So you'll notice this is kind of a very thick, fleshy lure. And you can see it here on display. They kind of use that to lure in prey. They get close, they'll gobble it up. But these guys have a nice fleshy U-shaped lure, where something like the long lure frogfish is very fine and thin. And that's a good way to tell the difference. And these guys vary in color as well. Recently, I've seen a number of black ones, and someone has also seen an orange version of one. Very cool, very in color. These guys are hard to find sometimes. The black ones are a little easier to find against the kind of light whitish sand. But they just kind of sit there and they're lie-in-wait predators. And something cool, a lot of photographers and a lot of people like to see them yawning. This is one yawning. I like that you can see his teeth. But actually that's them kind of puffing themselves up, making themselves really big, saying, you've gotten too close. I'm like trying to intimidate you. So I may have gotten a little too close to get this yawn, took my picture, and I went about my dive and left him alone. But like a lot of times when you see that, that's kind of, they're kind of in an intimidation. And more recently, I went on kind of a dusk dive there. The tide kind of lined up, and I had found one of the kind of this brownish tan one. He was pretty small, and a large black one. They were kind of sitting right next to each other. And as I was watching them and taking a couple pictures, the brown one kept nudging the black one. So I was like, okay, well, I'll hang out and wait and see what happens. And as it started to get darker and darker, they started to swim up into the water column. And you can see this one is really, really large. And this one's kind of a little bit smaller, but they kept swimming up towards the surface. And they began to spawn, which is really cool, really interesting to see. You can see the black one here, that is the female, and the brown one here is the male. Swam up, the female released the eggs. And yeah, too bad there was a lot of sand in the picture, but it was still a really cool thing to witness. And that was kind of the egg mass. And like a lot of broadcast spawners, that egg mass it floats, so it'll float away, the eggs will hatch, and they'll begin their life stage. Really cool thing to see. I think there was a lot of people that had saw different events. I think this time of year is kind of when they spawn, which is really interesting. All right, moving on from frogfish. So we've gone through our silty kind of fine sand. We've gone through our rubble. Now we'll kind of work our way underneath the bridge, under the rock pilings, or the bridge pilings, down under the bridge there. And under the bridges, that's where you'll kind of find your morays. This is our purple mouth moray. Kind of looks like a velvet purple, kind of dark purple lavender color. But what you want to pay attention to is its eyes. They are super bright golden color. Sometimes their purple color can be not quite purple, but you want to look at their eyes. It's that bright golden color. It's almost reflective, which is really cool. They're probably on the bigger side of the species you'll see there. You'll also see your green morays and your spotted morays, but this is kind of a unique species to find at the bridge. And this one's always fun to follow around as they're hunting. This is our sharp-tail eel. It's got some white spots going along its body, but it's got these orange spots on its head, kind of like a tannish color. Really isn't concerned with divers. You'll see it. It'll come right at you, swim right underneath you. It usually is foraging. It'll forage during the day, during the night. You'll just kind of see it swimming along. And a lot of times you'll see other predators following it, like Graysbees, other groupers, octopus sometimes, just other fish. And what will happen is the spotted moray will flush something out from a rock, and the other fish can eat it, which is really interesting. And sometimes they'll be hiding in the sand with just their head poking up. But I really like their noses are really cool. These are their nostrils. They do a lot of rely more on their sense of smell and their eyesight. And you'll notice that with the purple mouth as well. You can see its nose is really big. All right, I had to include a soapfish here. This is our freckled soapfish. You'll find that under the kind of rocks and ledges that are kind of created by the dock pilings. The freckled soapfish gets its name because it looks like it's covered in freckles. These guys are they don't really like the light. They're more nocturnal, so you'll see them back in cracks and crevices. So for snorkelers, you can duck down if you have a flashlight or something like that. That's a good way to find these guys. All right. This is another cool fish to find. This is another one that I really like their eyes. This is our yellow stingray. It's got the nice yellow color on it, about the size of a dinner plate with a long, really robust tail. Their tail is venomous like other stingrays. And then getting a closer look at their eye, really, really cool. That flap kind of comes down to kind of help regulate the amount of light that goes into the eye. And also helps with their camouflage. Oftentimes you'll see them kind of buried in the sand with just their eyes, spherical here, exposed. All right, we'll move on to some Blennies, and we have a few other Gobies to go over. Does anyone know that like probably the biggest difference between a Goby and a Blenny is? Yep. Blennies have cirri, these kind of antlers, hairdo, whatever you want to call it, coming off the top of their head. And Gobies, as we'll see with another picture, they don't have cirri on the top of their head. This is our seaweed Blenny, probably the most common Blenny you'll see there. They range in a bunch of different colors, from this kind of orange, red, white, kind of changes quite a bit. But what we want to look for is this kind of iridescent netting around their face. You can see this guy has really long cirri, so their cirri can vary in length as well. And these guys perch on rocks. They're pretty out and about. This guy was just on top of a rock, just hanging out, posed for my picture, and then went about its day. This is our hairy blenny. It's kind of in our database, it's in a complex, so there's kind of 3 species of blennies that are incorporated in this complex. And what that means is that there's 3 species that look so alike that it's very difficult to tell the difference between the 2 of them. So we combine them to make it easier. So that includes the hairy blenny, masquerader blenny, and the mock blenny. And they have these nice tufts of hair on the top of their head, or their cirri, and they have a nice spot on their operculum here, kind of their gill cover. This one here is in its mating colors. This is a male. It's got a red kind of head with the darker body, whereas this is a female. You can see those tufts of cirri or hair there, and that spot on the operculum of the gill cover. And these guys are big compared to other blennies. They can get up to 6 inches, so that is big for a blenny, whereas this one only gets about 3 inches. And this one you'll actually find on the pilings themselves. They kind of hang out more towards, I would say, the middle or the bottom and in the deeper water. But you can see that male there hiding in a sponge. All right, so as we're continuing to kind of go through our dive, we're kind of almost pretty much at the exit where we entered. We've kind of gone under the bridge, saw some blennies and some stingrays, and we're kind of at the very, very end, right where you got in. There's these cement blocks where the pilings for the bridge connect to the water, and all along the edge are these barnacles. And some of them are empty, some of them have barnacles in them. But if you look kind of right where the water meets the barnacles, look in all the empty barnacle shells. And that's where you'll find the molly miller, which is I don't know, very, very cool fish for its candy cane-like cirri on the top of its head. That's a good way to identify them. And just hang out there. Even if the water line drops, they'll still sit there, and the water line will go up, and as the waves pass through. Really cool fish. Ned and Nana have some really great photos of them. I think my favorite, there's like one upside down and the other one is right side up, and they're both right next to each other. It's a really cool photo. And then our last species is our frillfin gobies. So you'll notice that these guys don't actually have that hairdo, the tufts of hair on the top of their heads. And this one, just like our hairy blennies, is a complex as well. There's 6 species of frillfin gobies, and are all very difficult to tell the difference between them visually. You can see these 2 are different colors, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're different species. They have a nice blunt head with dark bars. I think there's usually 5 to 6 dusky bars. Kind of difficult to see on this pale one, but this black or this brown one here, you can kind of see it as it goes up. And they all hang out in that same area as the molly millers do in those old abandoned oysters near the surface. So great spot to end your dive when you're kind of low on air, or just kind of sticking your head in the water with your snorkel at the end of a dive, or finishing up your snorkel.
Do you do this diving, right?
You can do it all, snorkeling or diving. Yep.
Do you do diving?
Am I?
Do both?
I usually, sometimes I'll go out and I'll do a snorkel before I do my dive. That way, if I find any frogfish or anything like that, when I actually go for a dive, I know where they are. But I have snorkeled it before, and the great thing about the bridge is it's so shallow. I think in some places you could get 20 feet, but most of it's between 10 and 15 feet, if that.
Yeah, but for photography, it's better diving than really snorkeling.
It kind of depends. I know Lex does it snorkeling quite a bit. It kind of depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're looking for this is probably not the best example, but if you're looking for maybe the seaweed blennies or something, it may be easier to do it while diving because you're able to get in position a little easier, but you definitely could if you had some weight on, you're able to kind of sit down on the bottom, you're definitely able to take pictures of it.
I have two questions. One is, what is the name of the dive shop?
The dive shop?
Thanks. My second question is, can they help me to find out when is the highest slack tide? Because there's no way I am going to, I know I
Post it
can
on the
look it up
website.
on Google, but I really need somebody to.
Right. So
Can they help you on
oh
that?
yeah, definitely. So the question was, what was the dive shop's name that's close by, and kind of what could they help out with setting up, getting ready to do the dive? And yeah, of course, the name is Pura Vida Divers. Pura Vida Divers.
Pure Vida?
Pura Vida Divers. Yep. There's also, that's on the east side of the bridge. There's a, yep. 4C is on the west side. They're kind of both sitting on either end.
What is the name of it?
Force E. Yep. And they can help you out with tanks, weights, anything you need, renting gear, and they'll also be able to point you in the right direction for tides as well. Yep. And if you go to their website, I know I was looking at Pura Vida's today, and they do have a tide table. It'll tell you exactly what time the tide is and when to go.
I am planning to go next month,
Mhm.
but I am so glad that I am here and,
Yeah.
I did this like many years ago, but many years ago, you didn't have all the quantity
Right.
of life that you have now. And it's very surprising because this is the kind of stuff you find in Lambda Strait.
Right.
I mean, it's like when you find this species, like, wow.
Yeah, that's what makes this site so incredible, is that the amount of diversity you can find. And they, to our online viewers, she compared it to Lembeh Strait, which is a dive site in Indonesia that is very similar to this site in diversity and just weird things you see. And that is definitely true for this place. And I don't think there's a dive site in South Florida or in the tropical Western Atlantic that is similar to this. I think something special in Bonaire is more like a sloped reef where you're able to hit a lot of different habitats, where this is just kind of a sandy muck dive in the middle of a city, which makes it really interesting. All right. And you said you had another question, or just?
Yeah. Do you recommend to just go to do a little bit of snorkeling before to get ready for diving, or it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter. I don't think you could go wrong going anywhere on the dive site. There's that nice snorkel trail there that you can just follow. It makes it really easy. You're welcome to venture out. Just make sure to stay inside that the dive area.
And, yeah, I remember the question. How long it lasts the high tide?
So right. So it's recommended that 45 minutes to an hour before slack high tide, and generally depends on the tide itself, but you can stay in for another 45 minutes after. My dives usually last around an hour and a half, 2 hours. It's so shallow that you can spend a lot of time underwater. Okay, no problem. And as well, if you guys have any other questions on fish species or any questions at all about the bridge, I try to go about once a month, so I'm happy to help. Okay, so now we've completed our dive. We've checked out our shallow, kind of silty bottoms. We've gone through our rubble, and we've gone under the bridge, and we've checked out the fish on the exit there, those molly millers and frillfin gobies. Like I said before, this is an incredible dive site. It offers wide diversity in species of fish, invertebrates, just everything. Actually, it's not, if you're not just for fish lovers, there's a lot of species of invertebrates. Let's see, there's a lot of good resources online if you guys are also interested in more information. There's a couple of Facebook groups that offer condition reports daily, pretty much, by people that dive it every day. They post pictures of what they're seeing, and they'll tell you what the visibility is like and things like that, which is a good resource if you're thinking about doing that dive. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed joining me on our dive. I hope you guys learned a few new fish. Like I said, feel free to let me know if you have any questions. We're trying to plan a dive at Blue Heron Bridge as part of our great annual fish count. The kind of details are to be continued, so keep an ear out for that. I felt like I needed to add this parting shot, this last shot, because like I said, you can find other species of invertebrates, not just fish there. Recently, there was a female octopus with eggs in one of the old abandoned pipes there. And she was there for quite a while. And actually how I found out she was there was on that condition report on the Facebook page. If you're interested in octopus, this is also a great site to find them. I think the last,
Eye spots of babies.
yeah. So you can see the eyes and the rest of the squid there. And I think this was kind of in the middle of the time that they were there. And as the time came closer and closer, you could really see the details of the tiny baby octopus. But thank you again. I don't know if you guys have any questions, anything like that. So from my understanding, there was a dive shop there, but it's no longer there. Yeah, I can't remember how long it was, but we had, when I first went there, we had thought the same. The question was, is there a dive shop at Phil Foster State Park? I don't think it's there anymore. Your best bet is, yeah, Pura Vida or 4C is your best bet. So if you guys are interested in doing night dives, they do require a parking permit to be there, because parks, they close at sundown. So if you're going to be there after sundown, you need a special parking permit. But the dive shops there organize that. So just give them a call, let them know that you're coming, and they can you just stop by, pick up that permit, put it in your car, and you're good to go. It's just like a little parking pass that says you're diving, and you get it from the local dive shops. On their website, they'll tell you exactly the nights that they offer the parking permits. So I don't think they offer one if you wanted to go at like 1 in the morning. I think it's more reasonable night dive.
The 4C and Pura Vida offer on different nights.
Okay.
So that depending on when you go, check both websites, depending on when you want to go.
Okay. And for our online viewers, she said to check both 4C and Pura Vida as they kind of alternate nights when they do the night dive. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys again for coming. I hope you enjoy your night.
All right. Thank you all so much for coming to our Fish and Friends in June. We'll see you back the second Tuesday of July, and we'll hear from Dr. Kylie Smith and all her friends at iCare working on the reefs in Isla Mirada. So until then, we'll see you.